The Merrin farmhouse sat like a broken tooth on the farthest edge of Black Hollow Road, its windows sunken, its halls carrying the faint scent of damp soil and something older. Folks in town avoided it after sunset, claiming the lights inside flickered without any hands to turn them on, and that the woods behind it whispered the names of those long buried. I used to think they were just stories people told to scare themselves. But that was before I discovered what my family truly was. The Merrin family tradition was not something written in books, nor was it spoken about in the open. It passed like a quiet breath from one generation to the next, a whispered rule carved deeper into the family's bones than their own names. In Black Hollow, where the Merrins had lived for more than 2 centuries, people learned early not to ask too many questions about them. The farmhouse stood alone on land that never seemed to die, even when drought clawed through the valley or frost ruined everyone else's crops. The Merrins never struggled, never begged for mercy from the land, never suffered the way their neighbors did, and though no one dared to speak it out loud, everyone knew they had a secret. That secret was the ritual. Every son in the Merrin bloodline was born with a twin, always a girl, always fragile, always hidden away from the world until the day of union. The family called it a sacred ceremony, one said to bind their fates and ensure the purity of the bloodline. Outsiders would have considered it madness, but the Merrins believed it was the only reason their land flourished when others withered. They believed the twins were gifts, matched souls meant to preserve the power that had flowed through the lineage since the first Merrins settled the land. As a child, Elijah was told stories of honor, of duty, of maintaining the blessings they had been given, even though he grew up believing he had no twin. He heard these stories in the same calm tone his father used when teaching him how to plow a field or carve wood, as if the ritual were no stranger than any chore. What Elijah didn't know then was that the ritual was far darker than the soft words used to describe it. The union was not the loving binding of two halves, but something much older, something rooted in fear and superstition. The sons were groomed from birth to be protectors, while the daughters were raised unseen, unheard, shaped for a single purpose that no one outside the family ever lived long enough to question. Only the select few elders knew the truth behind the ceremony, and they wielded it like a blade. Every generation, the ritual was carried out without hesitation, without regret, without a flicker of humanity for the daughters who never had a chance to breathe freely. It had become so normal within the family that no one thought to resist, because resisting meant losing everything the land had given them, everything their ancestors had fought to preserve. This unbroken cycle had become the spine of the Merrin legacy, a duty so deeply ingrained in their identity that it remained unquestioned for centuries until Elijah began to feel the faint crack in the truth he had been raised to accept for most of Elijah Merrin's life. The story of his missing twin sat like a faint bruise in the back of his memory, something he rarely touched, but always felt. His parents had told him that she died during the first winter, a season so brutal that even the strongest livestock perished in the cold. They said the ground was too frozen to bury her properly, so they laid her in the family vault beneath the old willow tree. Elijah accepted the explanation as any child would, believing death was simply another part of life, something the land claimed whenever it wished. But as he grew older, the pieces of the story stopped fitting together. There were certain looks his mother gave the willow tree when she thought no one was watching, a look of guilt, fear, or something Elijah could not name. His father spoke of the twin only once a year, always after too much whiskey, always with a tremor in his voice, as if saying her name summoned something he did not want to face. It was around Elijah's 15th birthday that the strange occurrences began to intensify. At first, it was the soft tapping in the walls at night, a delicate rhythm almost like fingernails brushing against wood. Then came the sound of quiet breathing near his bedroom door, the kind that pauses when you move, the kind that listens. The attic, which no one in the family used, started groaning as if someone paced its length in restless loops. Elijah brushed it off as old house noises, but the feeling that he wasn't alone followed him like a shadow. One night, waking from a nightmare he couldn't remember, he heard a soft humming drifting from the hallway. The melody was unfamiliar, yet it tightened something deep inside his chest, as if it had been meant for him. He stood in the doorway, listening, frozen by the strange comfort of it, until it vanished the moment he whispered hello. The turning point came when he found the small footprint near the attic door. It was faint, dusty, almost wiped away, but it was undeniably real. The size was wrong for any adult, and far too delicate to be his own. He stared at it long enough for the fear to creep into his bones, a fear he tried to ignore for the next few days until he saw her reflection in the cracked hallway mirror. A girl, maybe 16, with the same eyes he saw in his own reflection, the same jawline, the same expression of confused longing. She stood beside him in the glass, but when he turned, the hallway was empty. That was the moment Elijah realized his twin had never left him at all, and the lie he had been raised with was beginning to unravel in ways the family could no longer hide. The cellar had always been the one place Elijah was warned to avoid, a rule delivered so strictly that it clung to him like a second skin. The door remained bolted at all hours, secured with an iron latch far heavier than any ordinary lock. His father claimed it was unsafe, that the floorboards were rotten and the air below too damp to breathe. But Elijah had seen the way the elders slipped inside during late hours, their steps careful, deliberate, as if they were entering a church built out of secrets. For years he accepted the explanations, but the house had grown louder with whispers, humming, and brief glimpses of a girl who mirrored his face, and those signs gnawed at him until curiosity became stronger than fear. On a quiet afternoon, while the rest of the family was in town, Elijah found the cellar key hidden in his father's coat pocket and felt the cold weight of it, as if it recognized him. The moment he opened the door, a stale breath of air washed over him, carrying the scent of mildew, iron, and something faintly sweet, like dried flowers left too long in a locked room. The staircase groaned with each step, and the dim light from above stretched thin as he descended. At the bottom, the cellar opened into a wide room he didn't know existed. The walls, made of old stone, were lined with shelves filled with children's dresses folded with unnatural precision, their fabrics yellowed with age. Porcelain dolls with cracked faces stared from dusty corners, their painted smiles chipped away into expressions that looked more like warnings than playthings. Elijah felt a chill slither down his spine as he moved deeper, feeling the weight of countless eyes on his back. Then he saw the restraints. Rusted metal cuffs bolted to a wooden table, thick leather straps stained with marks he didn't dare examine closely, all arranged as if someone had prepared them for future use. His breath caught when he noticed the family ledger resting on a pedestal nearby, its cover worn but intact. Inside, written in meticulous handwriting, were the names of every Merrin twin pair for generations. Each entry listed both a son and daughter, until he reached his own. Only his name was written. The space for his twin was left blank, not marked as deceased, not crossed out, simply empty, as if someone had intended to return and fill it in later. The realization struck him with icy clarity. The cellar wasn't a place of storage, it was a place of preparation. Whatever had happened to the twins of the past, whatever ritual the family had carried out in the shadows, had taken place in this very room, and the absence of his sister's name was not proof of her death, but a sign that her fate had been withheld for a reason. He was just beginning to uncover the truth about the twins did not come to Elijah suddenly. It arrived in pieces, each fragment more disturbing than the last, until the picture became too clear to deny. After discovering the ledger in the cellar, he realized the stories he had been fed since childhood were not just twisted, they were crafted with precision, shaped to control him, to mold him into someone who would never question what was expected of him. The ritual that had been described as a sacred union between twin siblings was nothing more than a facade masking a tradition rooted in fear, blood, and survival. As Elijah dug deeper, he found scraps of old journals belonging to his great-grandmother, pages hidden beneath loose floorboards as if she feared the family's wrath for having written them at all. Her handwriting trembled as she described the first time she witnessed the ceremony. The way the elders dressed the twin daughters in white, the way the sons were praised for their duty, and the chilling silence that followed after the ritual was complete. The entry spoke of prayers whispered in a language no longer spoken, of symbols carved into the earth beneath the willow tree, and of the belief that the land would curse them if the ritual was ever broken. It was in these writings that Elijah learned the truth that splintered the last of his innocence. The twins were never brides. The ceremony had nothing to do with marriage or unity between siblings. The daughters were sacrifices, offerings to whatever ancient force the family believed guarded their land. The sons were groomed not as partners, but as executioners, raised their entire lives to accept their role without question. The elaborate lie of a wedding was created generations ago to conceal the horror from outsiders, to give the act a twisted sense of purpose that made it easier for the family to continue the cycle. The purity of the bloodline was not about birthright, but about obedience, about ensuring the family remained bound to the ritual without rebellion. As Elijah pieced everything together, his stomach churned with a sickening mixture of fear and rage. Every loving gesture, every reassuring smile from his parents, every story told by the elders echoed with new meaning. He now understood why the twins were kept hidden, why no daughter had ever lived past the age of 18, and why he had been raised believing his own twin was gone. The lie had been crafted to keep him compliant, to ensure he would not question the ritual when his own time came. For the first time, Elijah realized that the twins were never the ones meant to fear the ceremony. It was the sons who should have been afraid. All along, Elijah had always imagined his twin as nothing more than a ghost of a memory, a name spoken rarely, and a loss his parents encouraged him not to dwell on. But after uncovering the truth about the family ritual, the strange sounds in the house began to make sense in a way that made his skin crawl. He realized the humming he heard at night wasn't the groaning of old beams, and the footsteps in the attic weren't tricks of his mind. They were signs that someone had been living in the shadows of the farmhouse long before he ever thought to question it. Driven by a mix of terror and determination, he followed the clues deeper into the heart of the house, searching for answers he was no longer sure he wanted to find. It was the dust-covered corridor behind the cellar that led him to a narrow doorway he had never noticed before. The wood around the frame was worn, as if countless hands had clawed at it over the years. When he pushed it open, a cold draft poured out, carrying the unmistakable scent of earth and something metallic. The staircase spiraled downward into darkness, lit only by the faint flicker of a lantern that seemed impossibly fresh. Elijah's breath trembled as he descended, each step echoing softly until the stairs ended at a hidden chamber carved into the ground beneath the farmhouse. There, huddled in the shadows like a wounded animal, was a girl with tangled hair and hollow eyes that still managed to hold a spark of something painfully familiar. She recoiled at first, baring her teeth in a mixture of fear and defiance. But when Elijah whispered her name, Alara, the wildness in her expression shattered. She stared at him with disbelief, as if she had been waiting her whole life to hear that single word spoken by someone who looked just like her. She was thin, far too thin, and her wrists bore faint scars from bindings long since removed. She spoke in a voice that trembled from disuse, telling him she had been kept there for as long as she could remember, guarded by elders who insisted she must remain hidden, untouched, and silent until the night of her 18th year. Elijah listened in horror as she explained what she had been told, that she was being prepared, shaped, and preserved for the ritual meant to bind her life to his. But she whispered the truth too. She had heard the stories of what really happened to the daughters, stories murmured by unstable older twins who had survived long enough to warn her before disappearing forever. The realization sank into Elijah like ice, and in that moment he understood that she had never been meant to survive the ceremony. Her existence had been reduced to a single purpose, and the day marked for that purpose was drawing dangerously close. Elijah had always sensed that something in his father's gaze carried a heaviness he could never explain, a tension hovering beneath every word spoken about duty, blood, and tradition. But he never imagined the truth would reveal itself with such cold precision. When Elijah confronted him, voice trembling, fingers still stained with dust from the hidden chamber, his father did not deny anything. He did not flinch or argue or express shock that Elijah had found Alara. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as if he had been waiting for this moment and was relieved it had finally arrived. His calmness unsettled Elijah more than any confession could. It was in that unervingly steady voice that his father explained the truth Elijah had never been meant to know. Elijah had not been raised to question the ritual. His father admitted that every lesson, every story, every boundary placed around the farmhouse was crafted to shape him into a willing participant. The tales of honor and unity were never meant for comfort. They were meant to ensure compliance. The Merrins had learned over generations that sons with rebellious hearts could break the ritual, and breaking it meant risking the wrath of whatever force their ancestors had bound themselves to. So Elijah's upbringing had been carefully sculpted, his father's stern guidance, his mother's frightening softness, the elders' watchful silence, all part of a calculated plan to ensure he would walk willingly into the ceremony without hesitation. Alara's isolation had been part of this plan as well. Her presence in the hidden chamber was not an accident nor an act of cruelty born from neglect. It was a deliberate preparation. The daughters were kept untouched by the world, shielded from any influence that might corrupt the purity required for the ritual. They were fed the lies that made them compliant, just as the sons were molded into tools of tradition. The family had never intended for Elijah to see her before the designated night, because seeing her too early risked awakening feelings, sympathy, protectiveness, love, that could interrupt the ceremony. Yet Alara's survival had been a mistake. She was never supposed to last this long. Many twin daughters did not. But she had clung to life through sheer will, a will that the family interpreted as a sign of stronger ritual potency rather than humanity. Elijah felt the betrayal hit him in layers, realizing his father had never doubted the ritual, realizing he had been raised like a sacrificial instrument rather than a son, realizing that the people who claimed to love him most had always planned for him to fulfill a role soaked in blood. And when his father insisted that there was no stepping away, that the ritual would proceed in 3 nights no matter how Elijah trembled or begged, Elijah understood that love had never been part of the Merrin legacy. Only obedience, fear, and the unbroken continuation of a darkness buried deeper than the roots of their land. As the night of the ritual approached, Elijah felt time tightening around him like a coil, every hour pressing heavier on his chest than the last. The farmhouse seemed to change with each passing moment, its familiar creaks turning into anxious whispers, its shadows stretching long and thin as if trying to warn him of the fate that waited beneath the willow tree. The elders moved through the halls with a silent purpose, their eyes colder than he had ever seen, their steps echoing with a finality that left no room for mercy. Even his mother kept her distance, her expression unreadable, as though she had already accepted that one of her children would not see the sunrise after the ceremony. Elijah knew that if he waited until the ritual began, escape would be impossible. Every son before him had been watched, guarded, and guided into the final act without a chance to resist. He could not let the tradition swallow Alara the way it had swallowed countless twins before her. In the hours before dawn, Elijah slipped into the hidden chamber where Alara waited, her eyes wide with fear, but burning with a determination that matched his own. She had spent her entire life trapped in darkness, shaped into something fragile yet unbroken, and now, faced with the truth of her fate, she clung to the only hope left him. Elijah told her everything: the journals, the ledger, the ritual, the horrifying role he had been meant to play. She listened without blinking, her breath trembling as she absorbed the reality that her life had never belonged to her at all. And yet, she did not collapse into fear or silence. Instead, she reached for his hand with a strength he did not expect, as if all the years of suffering had carved into her a resilience that the family had never intended to create. Together, they formed a plan so desperate that even Elijah doubted it could work, but desperation was the only thing they had left. The cellar had entrances the elders believed sealed. Alara, having lived beneath the farmhouse for years, knew its hidden layout better than anyone. She guided him through narrow tunnels where the walls seemed to pulse with old secrets, through winding passages that smelled of soil and decay, until they found the narrow escape that led into the woods behind the property. But freedom was not guaranteed. The Merrin family tradition was guarded not only by people but by fear, by stories meant to keep the twins from running, by whispered warnings that the land itself would strike down those who broke the ritual. Every step toward escape carried with it the weight of generations of silence, and Elijah could feel the presence of the elders moving through the house above them, sensing the shift, preparing to stop them before the cycle could finally be broken.